talk to my little friend.
Scarface, the rise of a gangster. Released in 1983, Scarface tells the troubled story of Tony Montana, played to perfection by Al Pacino, a Cuban refugee who flees to America in search for the American dream, where he starts off with nothing but climbs up the gangster and drug dealer ranks in Miami, where he eventually becomes one of the country's most powerful gangsters. But it all comes at a devastating price, as Montana's increasing drug use and desire to be number one makes him behave more erratic as he starts to lose many of the things that he cares about in life faster than he earned them. In this classic crime movie directed by Brian De Palma and co-starring Michelle Pfeiffer, which teaches us the world is yours, but it comes at a price. What is it about Tony Montana? I mean, he's a murderer and a gangster and a drug dealer, and yet he's still so damn likeable. Every time I watch this movie, I always find myself rooting for him. Could it be because the character is actually funny? Or could it be because underneath all the murder and greed, there is actually something very human about Montana? Well, let's try to find out today as we explore 10 things that you may not know about Scarface. Because first you do the review, and then you get the power, and then you get the women. Let's check it out.
This country, you gotta make the money first. Then when you get the money, you get the power. Then when you get the power, then you get the woman.
Number 10. It's a remake. Yes, before the violent as hell 1983 masterpiece that we all know and love, there was the 1932 original, which was produced by Howard Hughes, which was based on a 1929 novel which was loosely based on the life and times of Al Capone. So in other words, before we got this Scarface, we had this Scarface. The original isn't focused on Cuban refugees in Miami, but the Italian mafia in Chicago, where Antonio Camonte tries to gain ultimate power by climbing the gangster trenches. And just like the 1983 movie, it's his obsession and jealousy over his sister which becomes his downfall. What's interesting about the original Scarface is that we see Antonio meet his ill fate just as he becomes the big-time gangster, whereas in the 1983 movie, Tony becoming a big-time gangster happens in the middle of the film, and we actually see him live a luxurious life of crime and riches, and his downfall actually comes later. Also, the actor who played Antonio, Paul Mooney, was pretty scary too. Whenever he was about to do something horrible, he always tormented his prey with this creepy whistle. Just imagine Al Pacino whistling before killing people in the 1983 Scarface. Number 9. X marks the spot. One thing that is certain is Scarface is a pretty balls-to-the-wall movie. It doesn't hesitate with its use of brutal violence and profanities. Originally, it was even more extreme and brutal, as the movie was originally given the dreaded X rating, which is always a curse for movies back in the day, as it meant limited ticket sales. So the movie had to be drastically trimmed down so Scarface can get an R rating. However, Brian De Palma, being the crafty director he is, released some of the X-rated prints of the movies to cinema theatres, without the movie classification board knowing. Naughty, naughty. This is probably the only time anyone would have been able to see a complete, uncut print of the movie. Speaking of which, the movie rating board are pretty strange, because something that deeply upset them was the attempted assassination nightclub scene, where we see a clown get shot. It's weird that this is where they draw the line. Yeah, to hell with the guy getting sliced up in the shower by a chainsaw, but a funny clown in a mask getting shot, now that's just taking it too far. Number 8. Miami Says No. Scarface was set in Miami, where we see that Miami is one brutal, dangerous place, full of drug dealers and gangsters with chainsaws. In other words, it's probably not the ideal place for you to go to if you value your health and well-being. According to the movie, that is. However, the brutal depiction of Miami proved some issues for the film crew, as Scarface was denied permission to actually film in Miami by the Miami Tourist Board, who thought that the movie's negative depiction of the city would surely put some tourists off. So to make do, most of the movie was shot in Los Angeles, with the Californian city doubling for the tropical Miami city. Thankfully, there is no evidence to suggest that Scarface did indeed put off potential Miami tourists. Number 7. Insane amount of F-bombs. As mentioned, the movie holds no bars when it comes to its use of profanities, but Scarface has got to have some kind of record for the amount of times the F-word is used, as the movie drops a staggering 226 F-bombs. Wow. Well, I guess it's a movie about brutal gangsters. It's not exactly a tea party using all manner of prim and proper language, so I guess all those F-words just help with the brutality of Scarface. So if you were around in 1983 and found that you suddenly started using the F-word more and more all of a sudden, then chances are you had just been to see Scarface. But it wasn't just the F-word that caused profanity issues for Scarface either, which leads me to my next point. Number 6. Tony Montana and the dreaded pineapple. When Scarface was shown on TV, the language had to be drastically cut in order to accommodate for TV regulation standards. So all the F-words had to be cut out.
You got a look in your eye like you haven't been fucked in a year. You got a look in your eye like you haven't been touched in a year.
Along with other vulgarities.
Why don't you try sticking your head up your ass? Sticking your head up your toilet.
Including the interrogation scene at the start, where one of the officers asks Tony how he got his scar, in which he says,
"Where'd you get the beauty scar, tough guy? Eating pussy?"
Well, in the TV version, the word had to be changed to pineapple.
"Where'd you get that beauty scar, tough guy? Eating pineapple?"
Holy shit, better keep Tony Montana away from that evil dreaded pineapple. That stuff will mess you up. Seriously, this is brilliant, and you simply have to see Tony Montana talking about scar-inducing pineapple to believe it. Well guys, it's that part of the show again where I show you some of my memorabilia that's associated with the movie that I'm reviewing. And this time we have a Scarface in your pocket, where it has these little buttons here, and each button you press, it comes out with a famous quote that Tony Montana makes from the movie Scarface. Let's check it out.
I'm Tony Montana, a political prisoner from Cuba.
Brilliant. Number 5, Oliver Stone's real-life addictions. As the movie goes on, we increasingly see Tony Montana more and more succumb to a cocaine addiction, to which his behaviour becomes more erratic and unfocused, where he completely loses control. Despite the fact that Montana is a drug-dealing gangster, it's still distressing to watch. Well, art may have been imitating life, as the movie's script was written by Oliver Stone, who himself during the making of the movie was battling his own addictions, and maybe his real-life inner turmoil helped make the struggle we see on screen seem authentic. So if anything good came out of this turbulent time for Stone, at least he would have been able to present the struggles and downfalls of addiction through the movie Scarface. Number 4, Spielberg briefly steps in. One of the greatest moments in the movie is when Tony lets loose and unleashes his bloodlust and has a shootout with many of the would-be assassins who invade his home to kill him. In fact, I wouldn't call it a moment, it's an entire sequence. Yep, a long, drawn-out finale act of the movie, where we see Tony unleash his anger and frustration by shooting heaps of people and, of course, getting shot in the process. And it's brilliant. However, during the filming of this scene, none other than Steven Spielberg visited the set, to which the world's most famous director took to the director's chair and actually filmed a single shot from the famous shootout climax. So the next time you watch this moment, just remember one of the shots from this scene was provided by Spielberg himself. Hey, I'm just glad we didn't have E.T. running around to all the gangsters that had been shot going, ouch. Number 3, Brian De Palma nearly directed a very different movie. Brian De Palma was originally set to direct an entirely different movie before he got on board to direct Scarface. He was going to direct a movie so different from Scarface, the two movies couldn't be further apart. Indeed, De Palma was going to direct Flashdance. Wow, just wow. He literally went from a movie with a woman covering herself with water to a movie with Al Pacino covering himself with cocaine. In fact, before De Palma got involved with Scarface, director Sidney Lumet was attached to directing, but Lumet was out as he apparently hated the script, which probably isn't a good sign. I don't know why, but I just find it so fascinating that De Palma's directional efforts of that time could have been drastically different to the brutal world he creates in Scarface. Number 2. Casting possibilities. It's almost blasphemous to imagine anyone else but Al Pacino in the role of Tony Montana, as he is a force to be reckoned with and plays the part perfectly. However, before he landed the role, Robert De Niro was considered for Tony Montana, and in addition to that, John Travolta was also number 1 choice to play Tony's best friend Manny, and Travolta considered the role and even met up with Pacino, but he turned it down, and Steve Bayer was cast. And as for Elvira, Tony's tragic and troubled love interest, well, Glenn Close was the studio's first choice, despite the fact that Pacino always wanted Michelle Pfeiffer in the role. Apparently, Brian De Palma didn't want Michelle Pfeiffer and didn't even want to audition her, as at that time she was most well known for starring in Grease 2, which, let's just say, didn't have the best reputation. But eventually she won De Palma over and the rest was history. Number 1. The word Scarface is only used once in the movie. Yes, despite the fact that we all know the character as Scarface, thanks to it being the name of the movie, Tony only gets given this title just one time in the movie. And some of you might have even missed it as it's spoken in Spanish, where at the start of the movie when Tony is being threatened by the crazed drug dealer with the chainsaw, it's this thug who christens Montana with the nickname as he utters the word, which of course is Spanish for Scarface. So who'd have thought that despite the fact the movie is called Scarface, apart from that one time, Tony Montana never actually gets called Scarface. Well guys, that was my look into Scarface, one of the greatest gangster movies ever made. The movie that had us all saying hello to Al Pacino's little friend. And I hope that maybe you learned something new. Anyway, I'm Minty and the world is yours. Use it well. See ya!